Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all. Welcome to the December RWG meeting. Today, we're going to look at a pretty hot topic, certainly gaining a lot of interest related to artificial intelligence for requirements engineering. Just a quick note, we had a meeting 2 months ago, I guess, roughly, announced AI for RE project. So it's artificial intelligence for requirements engineering that was kicked off and divided up into different work streams to kind of divide the project into different pieces and being worked by multiple folks. So it's not on the shoulders of just a handful of people. But there are three work streams that will have different products that'll come out. The work stream groups have just now started to consolidate. They've identified some leaders and co-leaders. So starting to get into routine meetings themselves to understand how they're going to group and start working on their products. One of the main things the work stream number one is going to be doing that I think will kind of like a follow on to this, I guess. Eventually, there'll be a survey, I believe, to understand how different industries are using AI for RE activities. We'll continue this into next year. Today, going over the AI for RE is going to be an open discussion. Sarah Vazquez is going to be leading us in this presentation today. Sarah Vazquez is a senior system engineer at VNR with 17 years of experience in automotive and aerospace industries. She's been a member of NCOSI since 2012 and is a CAB representative for her company. She specializes in requirements management and system engineering processes development, providing mentoring and training to users within our organizations. One of her missions is to promote system engineering best practices in a way that makes it easy and intuitive for users to follow in their daily work. So with that, I will hand it over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Kevin. If there are questions at the end, we can go through those after this part of the presentation. We'll open it up for discussion with everybody. So I'm Sarah Vazquez. This presentation is going to go through kind of a generic, I would say, overview. This isn't specific to any industry or any organization. This is just based on best practices and current research and capabilities for AI for requirements engineering. So what I'm going to present are some use cases. How could we use this functionality to improve our requirements work? Some limitations, known limitations out there with AI technology, with tools, with how users feel about these tools, and then how can we achieve the right balance so that we can take advantage of AI for requirements engineering, but also ensure that we're doing due diligence as systems engineers. And then we'll open it up for a discussion where anybody can share their thoughts. If you have things you'd like to start putting in the chat so that we touch on those points during the discussion, please feel free. And like Kevin said, if you have any best practices or things that you'd like to share, just make sure that it's not any confidential information. And we can also talk about what would you guys like to see from either from AI tools or from capabilities, or do you see any areas that need to improve to make this more feasible as a practice for systems engineers? So first we'll jump into the use cases. These are things that AI can potentially help with in terms of managing requirements. And the common trend you're going to see here is it's usually the stuff that's busy work for the users. So maybe keep that in mind as we go through this. So first, importing documents into whatever requirements management tool that a user or an organization has. This tends to be really maintenance heavy work. Users have to spend a lot of time on fine details like how to format the documents. They have to check and make sure it gets in the tool the right way. It's not really value add work in some cases. It's more just something that has to be done so that they can then go analyze the requirements once they're available in the tool. So this is an area where AI could help by streamlining this process and getting the documentation available to the users sooner so that they can focus on the analysis work. Point two, somewhat related to analysis, is that it would help if AI tools can parse through these large documents of requirements and maybe perform some preliminary analysis or categorization. So if users could enter in some prompts like, please identify me all the requirements that are related to this feature and add a tag about that. Or please identify all the software requirements that you find in here. This is something I've seen teams do because it helps further development work. Maybe you want software requirements to be analyzed by a specific group within your organization, or maybe you want to categorize requirements based on different features or functions that you're developing. So this is, again, kind of busy work for a person to have to do this. It gets a benefit later on if you can analyze the requirements the way you want after you've done this categorization or tagging. But to do that actual work itself, it's not fun, it's not very value added, and it's something that would be nice if it could be automated through an AI. The third point, so checking requirements against standards, like the NCOSE Guide to Writing Requirements. This is something I think most of us have in mind when we think of an AI tool and how it could help with requirements engineering. So this is things like, are your requirements complete? Are they using vague terms? Are they defining the conditions that are needed for the requirements? These types of checks can be hard for users to keep everything in mind. Nobody's perfect. Even if you are writing requirements with this intent to meet these guides, sometimes we fail, sometimes we miss something. So having a tool that can sanity check this can be really helpful to engineers to just ensure the requirements they're getting put out there for further review are good quality from the start, as good as it can be. And it can also prompt users to think about things they might have forgotten. Did I use a phrase like, the system shall provide this data as soon as possible? That as soon as possible could get flagged as a vague term and something that I need to improve before I submit this requirement into my system. Point 4, identifying similarities or duplicates or conflicts within a set of requirements is also challenging for users to do this on their own. Unless you know every single requirement in your database, and sometimes we have tens of thousands of requirements to handle, it's really hard for a user to know if they're creating similar or duplicate requirements, or if they're actually creating a requirement that conflicts with another one. Teams can manage this through manual effort and through due diligence, but it is challenging. So if an engineer needs to spend a couple of hours when they're writing requirements, making sure they're not creating duplicates, and an AI tool could do this in a couple of minutes to identify duplicates or conflicts, that can be a big support to the user. Point 5, decomposing requirements. So this one, take it with a grain of salt. Decomposition is, the process of turning a requirement at one level into sub-requirements at another level. You're breaking it down based on your system architecture development, and you want to get requirements for that new item, whatever it is that you're decomposing into. This can be challenging for users because you need to take into account a couple of different things, not just your source requirements, but also whatever context you are using to perform the decomposition. So whether it's a system architecture or boundary diagram or something, you need to know that context in order to create a decomposed requirement with the right boundary and inputs and outputs and actions that are being performed. So if an AI tool could have some insight into this information, maybe it could act as a prompt and help users to create these requirements more quickly or more comprehensively to not forget things that need to be included. A really simple example, let's say you're decomposing a system requirement into software and hardware, and you have boundaries documented for software and hardware, and you could see in the decomposition, it's checking to make sure this hardware input was accounted for, and this hardware output is going to the software, and so on. So that's a way that it could help with decomposition. Next point, checking the consistency of requirements against the boundary and interfaces, similar to the decomposition point, but even if I'm at system level, let's say, and I'm trying to understand, have I written appropriate requirements for system level? And then I find out that I have a boundary that shows these interfaces and these inputs and outputs, but I'm talking about something in the requirements that's not in that boundary, or it's not one of those inputs or outputs. Is my requirement written at the right level? Did I maybe miss something in the boundary or the inputs and outputs? So having that type of consistency check, it's something we already do as systems engineers, but it's a manual effort, and it can be, again, challenging to keep all these things aligned. So getting support from an AI to help with this consistency check can allow us to focus on the problem areas and solve them, as opposed to spending a lot of time just having to identify that the problem exists in the first place. Next point, traceability and supporting impact analysis. So with traceability, we know we have to create traceability between requirements at different levels, trace requirements back to their source, maybe trace requirements to tests and to architecture or design. All of that work has to be done, and it does need human oversight, absolutely. But an AI could maybe help by looking at the context of the things you're tracing and propose, hey, it looks like this requirement is related to this test. You could create a trace. Or it looks like you should trace this requirement to this system architecture element because they're related. It could also help if AI can support impact analysis. So many requirements management tools already have a way to allow users to see if you change an item, what happens to the downstream items that are affected through the existing traceability. But AI could maybe take it a step further and say, you're changing this customer requirement, and I notice these linked system requirements won't be able to handle that change as is based on the context of what's going on here. So you might want to think about, do I need to modify my system requirement to add a new performance parameter, something like that. So if AI can help give the information to the systems engineer so that they can go make a decision, again, it's all about saving time and letting the AI be a tool to support systems engineering work that we already have to do anyways. The next point is about reporting metrics and trends. Again, we have all these requirements. We need to be able to know what's going on with them. So how many of them are complete? How many of them have been tested? Are requirements getting more complete over time, or are we somehow having a gap where we can't finish or implement requirements that we need? How much of the customer requirements have been satisfied by the work that we've done? There's lots of ways to report this information, and there's lots of tools that already have some features built in for that. But in many cases, I still do see a lot of user effort to set up these tools or define what needs to be reported. And so this might be an area where AI can more easily look through the data, find the trends, and generate it into some user-friendly reports or metrics. Next point is translating content. So a lot of teams have global teams, and they might receive requirements in different languages. So it's challenging unless you have a built-in tool that you're using in your organization, because you don't want to go copy paste some proprietary content in Google Translate and get your results from there. You want to make sure that you're protecting any proprietary information. So having translation services built in to your requirements management tool or supported through AI in some way, this can be really beneficial for the users to allow convenience, but also protect any company sensitive information. Also, in some cases, if the AI can allow users to work in the language they feel most comfortable and then provide a translated result in whatever business language the organization has, that can help improve the quality of the requirements overall, because users are able to really figure out the technical details in a way that they're confident, and they can translate it at the end into something that everyone is able to read. Next point, search capabilities. So again, we've mentioned a lot of requirements data sets are very large. It can be hard to find information. It can be hard to find information if it's using different ways of expressing that throughout the requirement set. So if I'm talking about power, or if I'm talking about voltage, or if I'm talking about battery, I might not be able to find all those requirements using the same simple keyword search. So if AI can find smarter ways to search, it can help users to get to the information they need more quickly and comprehensively to find everything that they're looking for. This can help with looking for requirements trends, or maybe you wanted to decompose a customer requirement about something and you can't remember exactly how they talked about it, but you know it was related to power somehow. You can use searches like this to help find that information more quickly. And the last point, this is kind of like what you'd think of maybe as your chat features. So if the user could enter some prompts, not necessarily a search or not necessarily maybe writing a requirement or decomposing one, but maybe the user wants some information. Like, I'm in this requirements document. Can you please summarize what is the main point of what this is about? Or maybe it is a question. Can you help me find requirements about this topic in this document? Or what is the completeness of this document for requirements about whatever feature I'm looking at? So being able to have maybe a more interactive prompt setting for AI tools could help users to interact with the data in a better way than just having to know where to find it on their own and search through thousands and thousands of requirements to get what they're looking for. So these are our use cases. Next, we're going to jump on to limitations. Again, this is not industry specific, tool specific, anything. These are just points about AI in general and some of the limitations that it may have for systems engineering application for writing requirements. So the first point is AI may lack a comprehensive domain-specific knowledge. A lot of the AI sources that are out there, they might not have these data sets of really detailed knowledge about whatever product or system an organization produces because that information is proprietary. And so AI may not know everything that the system needs to do. This is where the engineering effort comes into play, and people need to be trained in their systems to know what makes sense and what doesn't coming from an AI response. Of course, AI, we know, could maybe potentially introduce bias. It could be reading a data set where it's true that there's lots of information pointing that way, but maybe that's not the only perspective out there. It's just what the AI found. So users have to be aware of that and keep in mind that AI results should be vetted, they should be discussed, they shouldn't just be blindly accepted as is. The next point is that AI outputs could lack transparency and justification. So when you're building an engineering system, when you're designing something, you need to be able to back up what you're doing. So if you're writing a requirement, you need to be able to say, this is why I need this requirement and have a justification for it. If you are taking an AI output and you don't understand that, then there's a problem. So in that case, there's still the need for a human interaction with any AI information to say, here's where it's coming from, and I understand why it's coming from there, and therefore I accept that I want to use this data. Next point. So for AI decision making and learning, it's really important that this is based on high quality and relevant data. And this is where maybe we have to get a little more customized in how AI is being used for different organizations or industries. So obviously we want data that's a lot of data. So it's a good data set for learning and models. So we want a large language model, but we also want to make sure that that's not including results that are irrelevant or potentially incorrect for whatever it is that we're designing. So if I want to go out and make a cell phone, I don't necessarily really want a lot of information about how to make a airplane. You know, there might be some crossovers, but I need to make sure that I'm getting relevant data for whatever it is I'm working on. Next point, the AI tool should integrate with existing tools and processes. So this is getting into more of the tool category, but if we're using AI for requirements engineering, it needs to feel seamless for users. It needs to be something that they can go into their requirements and get these feedbacks or prompts or support from an AI without having to copy paste things into a different place, potentially losing valuable information like history of the changes or who did the work. So it's important that we think about how the requirements are being managed, and AI solutions should be supporting that existing infrastructure. AI tools do require an initial cost and a resource investment, so that's something organizations should take into account. It's not something that you'll be able to use immediately off the bat with no concept or no plan in your organization. So you can't just throw an AI resource at people and expect it to be effective without putting some things in place. We'll talk about that on the next slide, like what you can do to balance introducing AI with how to do it effectively. So there's a risk that AI results could violate confidentiality or intellectual property rights, and we might not know it. So this kind of, again, goes back to the data set that the AI is using. So if somehow company proprietary information gets put into that data set, and then it's providing suggestions to you, and maybe you're a competitor of that company, there's a potential that you could take AI generated content and use it for your system, but it was actually somebody else's idea. So in this case, we'll talk again on the next slide about balance. It's really important to know what your AI is doing, what it bases its sources on, how it protects confidentiality, how you can protect your intellectual property, and everything like that. Now, these last 2 points are about the users. So everything previous was about kind of AI limitations itself, but there's also a human aspect of it, of course. So some users may have a negative perception of AI. They may see it as a threat to their work, or it's going to replace their work, or they may just not like AI. They may not trust it in general. So this is something that any organization or user who's wanting to implement AI solutions needs to address and make sure that they have a clear understanding of what these concerns are and how to provide a solution to each concern. And then the last point, users may overly rely on the AI. So what we don't want is blindly trusting the results without verifying the quality. We want to make sure that users see AI as a tool. I may have it in the next slide, but AI should be a digital assistant. It should not replace human effort or work. And when used this way as more of a prompt or something to help us do the work that's hard to do, like a calculator can help you do math. In the end, if you're balancing a spreadsheet, though, you're still responsible for those numbers. The calculator is just a tool. It does not take ownership of the content. So AI is similar here. It's a tool. All right. So we're going to move on to the next slide about balance. So we've seen what can AI do for requirements engineering, and we've also seen what are some of the limitations that there are. So how do we make that all work together? And the first most important point is that we have to balance this temptation for AI to do the work with the need for human knowledge and oversight. As systems engineers, requirements are a responsibility that we have. It's a work product we have to generate and take ownership of. So if we're using AI to do requirements engineering, we need to make sure we have checks and balances in place to ensure that the content that's being generated is being properly vetted and is being managed just like a requirement we would write ourselves. So as I mentioned, using AI as a digital assistant where it helps you, maybe it gives you a starting point or it pre-analyzes some data for you so that you can do the rest of the work, or it finds some trends that might have been hard for you to determine going through thousands of requirements. Whatever it's doing it as a tool to assist you. So with that mindset, where we're still maintaining a very strong ownership of the requirements themselves, AI can be really effective as a digital assistant. It can help save time on the mundane or the repetitive or the labor-intensive manual effort so that we can focus on technical content and creating new solutions to existing problems. So to help get this balance, we recommend having robust practices such as, first of all, make sure you thoroughly vet whatever AI tool you want to use. Make sure that you can see how it's securing your data, how it's working, what functionality it has. Is that functionality things that your organization struggles with? So if an AI does something that your organization is already really good at, maybe that's not the way you want to use it. So also understanding your pain points and where you struggle with requirements engineering can help you find an AI solution that meets what you need. And then also, it's really important to make sure whoever is using the AI is very well versed on whatever system you're developing. So this helps to avoid things like the AI hallucinates a very good sounding answer or a really good sounding requirement, but it's actually not technically accurate at all. If your users understand the system, they'll be able to catch things like that. Or if the AI provides a response that gets you part of the way there, but it's missing some understanding of the system, the users then can fill those gaps because they understand what needs to be done. It's very important. This isn't just something you could throw at a brand new user who has no system experience and even no requirements experience, and they could be generating wonderful requirements with AI with no trouble. We still have to have this knowledge in place. It's also important to train users, like we went through today, on proper use and on the limitations of AI. So if users can see how can I use this and where should I be cautious or where should I not use AI, just bounding that for the users can really help ensure they're able to effectively use whatever features the AI offers for requirements engineering. If you tell a user, you can just use AI to press a button and it'll write all your requirements for you, and you finished your work in 2 hours that normally takes 3 months, that's a bad idea. And that's not going to be something that will give you good results. So, as long as you have proper procedures in place to tell users how they can use this, and make sure that those are being followed and the users still maintain ownership, you'll be a lot more successful in using AI effectively. Always, when we're doing requirements management, it really helps if you have a tool that can maintain things like a history of the changes or that has permissions and other settings. So, when considering AI, again, coming back to what tool do you use to manage requirements today? If the tool can make sure that a user doesn't do something they shouldn't have access to do, through permissions or access rights, settings like that, and the tool can maintain a history of the changes, then it's not the end of the world if somebody makes a mistake. If I'm a brand new engineer and I say, rewrite this specification of 1,000 requirements using AI, and then I try to send that off for implementation and test, hopefully my tool would stop me because I haven't gone through any of the process that's supposed to be there. If I'm brand new, I shouldn't have access to be able to edit everything at will. So things like that can help avoid mistakes. And worst case scenario, if you're in a requirements management tool and you do a mistake, you can revert using the history. You can revert the changes to whatever was the previously accepted version. So AI should be used with a well-defined requirements management system and a requirements management tool. And then finally, maybe most important, we're still conducting thorough requirements reviews. So we still have processes to make sure the requirements going through the system are complete, correct, and consistent. So we're not replacing that activity to manage reviews with the stakeholders of the requirements. We're just helping to get things more efficiently created as requirements and maybe more complete going into the review so that somebody in the review doesn't say, hey, you use this vague term and I don't know what it means. Hopefully the AI has already caught that for us and we can improve the requirement and save people some effort in the review itself by having something solid for them to come to review. So those are all of the points that I have, and there may be more, and we're definitely interested in opening up the discussion to the users.